So, anyways, good morning and happy Tuesday. Let's start off with our daily pledge. Today is a new day. I'm ready to be the best me I can be. I will listen so I can learn. I will try hard so my brain can grow. I will not give up. I can learn anything I put my mind to. Again, it's another opportunity for you to continue to work on yourself. Like I said yesterday, your challenge was to be intentional and make every minute of the day count and stay motivated and be mindful and stay focused. How did it go? How did you do? I'm hoping it went well. Make sure every morning you're doing your daily check-in. Where are you at on a scale of 1 to 10? How are you feeling? Are you using your tools? Just because you might have a great week or a great month or a great 6 months, whatever it may be, we can't forget about our tools because a lot of times we ebb and flow, right? Things are up and down, and we need to just make sure that we're staying mindful of the tools we need to use to feel better. Some folks have to start to realize how their cycles are. We've talked a little bit about that. Maybe spring's not a very good time of year for you. Maybe you feel better at certain times of the month. Whatever it may be, don't forget about your toolbox. Don't set it away. Don't put it away so that you can't see it and you forget about it. Make sure it's visible. Make sure you're always doing a check-in. Make sure you know where you're at. Maybe you could keep track of it on a calendar. But either way, it's just good to be mindful of it. Keep monitoring it so that you know where you're at and what you need to do to keep yourself well or to feel well. So anyways, topic Tuesday, we're going to talk about boundaries. And I think obviously we've touched base on this before, but it's so important because setting boundaries with people is huge in relationships, not working on your physical health, your mental health, your day-to-day routine. Everything kind of correlates together because you have to set boundaries in order to make sure that you have your own personal space. You have time to take care of yourself, make sure you're saying no, and so on. So anyways, Boundaries 101. This is our worksheet, Boundaries 101, okay? Boundaries are limits we set for ourselves. Everyone's boundaries are different, and they are based on what's personally important to us. Boundaries can be a set of several aspects of life, such as work, relationships, families, and conflict. Boundaries can be physical or emotional limits, and they help us determine a person's comfort level, needs, and preferences. Essentially, boundaries dictate how we want to allow ourselves to be treated and how we treat others. Healthy boundaries allow for accountability, respect, and open communication. Now, we always want to maintain healthy boundaries, right? So if you grew up in a home with no boundaries, where they were set or they weren't set, or where people violated them, maintaining and setting boundaries is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard to set boundaries if you were never taught that, or if people constantly violated your boundaries. Setting clear boundaries is not selfish, okay? It sets the tone for healthy relationships, and it's an important part of one's own well-being. If you ever notice you feel resentful or drained by a person, place, or situation, it's time to take a look at your boundaries. Remember, boundaries are not threats or ultimatums. Sometimes it's hard for others to respect our boundaries, but that's not a reflection of you. So setting boundaries is hard. Now, one of the things that I like to tell people is that if you've never set boundaries before, and then you go in, start setting boundaries with somebody in your life, okay, is for the fact that then, sorry, you get these things, it's all in my brain, right? If you go in setting boundaries, what's going to happen is that they're not going to like that. You may get some retaliation, you may get some consequences with that. And so setting boundaries is important, but it can be really, really hard, and it's hard to maintain that because people may not like that. And so that doesn't mean you should quit, and that doesn't mean you should allow them to walk all over you. You have to keep reinforcing them. You have to stay consistent. Setting boundaries for the first time, if you don't set them consistently, people are never going to respect them. So healthy boundaries look like what? Valuing your own opinion, respecting limits by you and others, not compromising your own values for someone else's, and sharing information appropriately. I just had this conversation not too long ago with somebody about meeting somebody for the first time or being in a relationship. When you start dating or even building a friendship, you don't ever have to disclose to them about your mental health or situations in your life that have negatively impacted you, maybe you need to wait a few months. Maybe you wait a long time down the road. But what I think happens is that we assume that people can see, like, I have a mental illness written on my forehead, or I've had a lot of trauma in my life, and we feel like we need to display that information right off the bat. But that's not true. You don't have to do that. That is your personal information. It's for nobody to know until you can trust them. You've set boundaries. You respect them. They respect you. So you have to make sure you're communicating what's appropriate at that time. Okay. Effectively communicating your needs and wants. Accepting no from others. It's okay. You have to tell people no, and you have to accept no from others as well. You have to understand that that's their boundary too. And it should be okay, because that's how it works, back and forth. Again, being able to say no and being able to identify when a boundary has been broken. So we have to know that we set a boundary, and we have to know when it's broken. So how do we set them? First and foremost, before I get to that, I want to back up to knowing when to set boundaries, okay? How do we set them? When do we set them? First and foremost, you need to know kind of what you're all about. Part of that is knowing what you prefer, what you want, and what you need. And so you write down some things. Get out a piece of paper. Start thinking about what your boundaries are. Okay, for instance, don't call me after 9 o'clock. And if you're going to come into my house, take your shoes off. And, things like that. Those are minor. But those are still boundaries, and those are the things that you have to write down. So knowing when to set boundaries is huge and something to stay mindful of. The first one is you feel taken advantage of or untrusting. If you are starting to feel that you're not being able to trust and that you are being taken advantage of, that's when you set a boundary. The next one, your space or your privacy is being interrupted. If you don't have space and you don't have privacy and people around you are irritating you and you're feeling as if you're almost becoming a little claustrophobic, or you're getting burnt out, or your attitude is poor, that's when you know you need to set a boundary. You usually can tell if you stop and listen to yourself. You will know when it's time to set a boundary. The next one says you feel uncomfortable or angry with something someone did. If somebody did something to you or said something to you that's not sitting well, you need to set a boundary. You're being blamed for something you're not responsible for doing. If somebody's coming back at you and blaming you for something that you had nothing to do with, you need to set a boundary. You feel others are pushing ideas, actions, or feelings onto you. If you feel like somebody's trying to tell you to do something that you don't want to do or you're not interested in, you need to set a boundary. You feel disrespected, insulted, or hurt if somebody hurts your feelings or disrespected you, made fun of you, blew you off, whatever it may be, you need to set a boundary. You want to share how you want and do not want to be treated. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve to be treated fairly, and you deserve to be treated with the same set of boundaries and values that other people have, or whatever it may be. But anyways, you have to explain that to folks. One of the misperceptions of boundaries is that you set something in your mind and you expect others to know that. But I just want you to know that some people don't know that. And so we have to communicate that. Even if you've set it in your brain, if you don't share that with others, they're going to constantly violate that boundary because they don't know any better. And so you need to let them know that. If you say, hey, please don't call me that. Hey, please don't do that. Instead of just getting mad and shutting people out, you have to let them know what they did. You have to share with them what that boundary is, or they will never know that. And they are going to wonder what happened. If you feel bullied, abused, or someone is being aggressive, and if you see somebody trying to compete with you, set a boundary with them. So how to set a boundary? Setting boundaries may take time and practice. Don't get on yourself, and if it feels hard, it's going to be difficult. Setting boundaries is difficult. Number one, identify what behaviors from others that is acceptable for you and that might cause you discomfort. I should say that are not acceptable, okay? So that's part of it. Describing the behavior that is not acceptable to you. What don't you like? If you don't like something what's happening, You need to do something about that. Number 2, clearly communicate your boundaries with others. Learn to say no and be assertive. Remember, assertiveness, a lot of that comes with I statements. I think, I feel, I want, I need, and we can go back over I statements. But when you use I statements, it's being assertive rather than saying you need to do this and you need to do that and you didn't do this. That's attacking. And so there's no boundaries are going to be set. The communication will be shut down. So clearly communicate, be assertive, learn to say no. That 2-letter word is probably one of the most complicated words for folks to use, but we have to learn to say no. Number 3, decide what to do if someone breaks your boundaries. This may be a tough discussion. It may mean ending a relationship or taking a break from it. But at the end of the day, what you need to do is if somebody breaks your boundary, they knew about it, you explained it to them, you asked for them to follow that and they still broke that boundary, then you need to come up with a consequence because you cannot allow people to do those things to you. It's not okay. And so you need to figure out what that is. And it could be a really tough decision. It may mean not, ending that relationship or distancing yourself from that person. But it has to be done, right? Here are some examples of that communication. Again, please don't do that. I'm not comfortable with this. I need some time alone. I want to tell you how I feel, but it's not okay for you to yell at me. You want people to be able to communicate back to you appropriately. What are your boundaries? So here's some questions to ask yourself before we're done today. When we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about writing things down and we're communicating them. How do you know what they are? What do you know, or how do you know what you want or what you're thinking? Here are some questions to ask yourself when setting boundaries, okay? Number 1, what is important to me? What is important to you? What matters to you? Is it how people communicate and treat you? How they are in your home? How they are to you out in the community? What is important to you? What are some of your boundaries? What are some of your boundaries? Maybe you don't like hugging. Maybe you don't want people to tap you on the shoulder. Maybe you have a bit of a bubble and you need people to stay out of that. Maybe you don't want people to holler. You don't want them to call you after a certain time, whatever it may be. What are some of your boundaries? How do these boundaries protect your values? Think about things that you want. How does that protect you and your space? So think about those things. What boundaries do you need to set? If you know there are some things in your life right now that feel icky, they're just not good, you know that something's not right, it's not sitting with you well, and you don't like it, what boundaries do you need to set right now? How can I effectively communicate my boundaries? When you are going to communicate to somebody, think to yourself, I statements. I think, I feel, I want, I need, I know, things like that. Using I in a conversation with somebody makes it less attacking and they're going to be more willing to listen to you. How can I set and maintain these boundaries? Again, it's just going to be consistently reinforcing it and not allowing people to stray from that, not letting people walk all over you and pointing it out to them when they broke that boundary. Why are my boundaries important to maintain, and how do my boundaries vary depending on the person? Sometimes it's different. We have different boundaries at work than we may at home. We have different boundaries at the grocery store versus a birthday party. So you have to kind of also pay attention to how it's a little bit different with people around you, what situations you're in, and so on. But most importantly, they have to be consistent. You have to, again, you be assertive, communicate what you're thinking and feeling, using those I statements, and just knowing that it's important for people to respect you and your space, and knowing what you want and need is huge. So start writing, get out a piece of paper, think about boundaries, think about situations in your life. Maybe you already have some boundaries that you don't even recognize you set until you've sat down and really thought about it and wrote them down. But it's important to reinforce them. And most importantly, we got to practice saying no. Okay? Before we go, advantages of healthy boundaries. Number 1, it's good for your mental health. Number 2, it's good for your emotional health. Number 3, it's good for your time management. It's good for your day-to-day functioning. Number 4, it develops your identity. You know who you are, what you want, when you want it, how you need it, whatever it may be. It develops your identity. It avoids burnout. When you set boundaries, you can avoid burnout, and you can just be a better in relationships and a better person all around. And it influences others' behaviors. Maybe you just need to be that trendsetter. You need to be that leader to show people around you the importance of setting a boundary. And that's a great thing. Influence others by your behavior, by the boundaries you set, and see how things change around you. So that's a little bit today. We could talk about boundaries for hours. We'll probably come back a little bit. But if you get anything out of today, remember your I statements when you're communicating. Get out a piece of paper. Start writing down what your boundaries look like. What do you want? What do you need? Are there certain situations in your life right now that you don't like, that they feel icky? What do you need to do about that? And most importantly, stay consistent and share with folks, what it is that you don't like that they've been doing. And if somebody breaks your boundary, you have to come up with a consequence to reinforce the fact that that's not okay, so that way they don't walk all over you. And it either is going to help your relationship, or maybe you start to recognize that's not something that you want in your life. Anyways, boundaries. It's Tuesday. I hope you can get out and go for a walk. Make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Make sure you're eating your 3 meals a day. Make sure you're getting plenty of rest. Make sure you're being responsible and taking care of yourself. Get out a piece of paper. Start working on your boundaries today. Write some things down. Start reinforcing some things and make small changes. It's important, and it'll be really impactful in the end. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.